Commander Elias Grant had walked into many rooms filled with tension, but none felt like this one. The council chamber of the Valari High Assembly stretched wider than any human hall he had ever seen, its ceiling so high it vanished into shadow. The walls glowed faintly with living crystals that pulsed with light, as if the entire structure was alive and listening. Every sound echoed. Every movement drew attention. Elias adjusted the collar of his uniform, the blue and silver fabric stiff against his neck. Behind him stood two aides from Earth, nervous but trying to hide it. He could feel their eyes flicking to him for reassurance, but he gave none. He had no comfort to offer them. Not today. At the far end of the chamber sat the Valari Council. 12 figures rested inside towering exosuits that gleamed like polished obsidian. Each suit was covered with etchings of their clan symbols, sharp and proud, and the air around them shimmered faintly with the power of energy shields. Their forms looked almost statuesque, as though they were machines rather than living beings. No human had ever seen a Valari outside of these armored shells. To the Valari, protection was identity, and armor was more than defense. It was honor, tradition, and self. Elias bowed slightly as protocol demanded. "I am honored to be received by the Council of the Valari. May this day lead us closer to peace." The chamber remained silent for a long moment. Then one of the armored figures rose, the echo of its movement filling the hall. The voice that came was metallic, amplified, and layered with static, as though the armor itself spoke for its occupant. "Peace," the Valari counselor said slowly, "is a fragile thing, Commander, and your people walk on fragile ground." Elias kept his face calm, though his heart pounded. Humanity had reached out to the Valari after a series of border conflicts. Small skirmishes had already left scars on both sides. Earth wanted an alliance. The Valari wanted proof of humanity's worth. This meeting would decide whether the galaxy saw humans as builders or destroyers. As the counselor's words faded, the chamber doors slid open. A sound like rushing air filled the room. All eyes turned toward the entrance, and then she appeared. A single Valari figure stepped into the chamber, without armor. The room erupted in a storm of whispers and metallic clicks from the other counselors. Elias felt his aide stiffen behind him. His own eyes widened despite his years of training. She was tall, her form lean but graceful. A pale silver hue covered her skin, and patterns like flowing rivers glimmered faintly across her body. Her eyes glowed softly, not mechanical but alive, a brilliant mix of blue and green. She wore no plating, no exosuit, nothing to shield her. By Valari standards, she was utterly exposed. For her people, this was not just bold, it was unthinkable. Elias had studied enough Valari culture to know what it meant. To appear without armor was to appear naked. It was to reveal not just body but soul. It was an act of vulnerability that no Valari leader had committed for centuries. The armored counselors shifted uncomfortably, their glowing visors flicking between the woman and Elias. The unarmored Valari walked forward with steady steps. Her expression was calm, almost serene, though Elias thought he saw a quiet fire in her eyes. "I am Ambassador Calith," she said. Her voice was soft, clear, and unfiltered by metallic distortion. It echoed through the chamber like a song carried by wind. "And I will speak." One of the counselors slammed a heavy arm against the floor, the sound like thunder. "You dishonor your people, Calith. To appear before this human without the shield of honor is to crawl like prey before a predator." Calith did not flinch. She kept walking, each step echoing louder than the protests. Elias watched in silence, his thoughts racing. Why would she do this? Why now? This was more than rebellion. This was a message. Calith stopped halfway across the chamber. Slowly, deliberately, she lowered herself to the floor. Her knees touched the smooth crystal surface. Then she leaned forward, resting her hands flat, lowering her body in a gesture Elias recognized from cultural briefings. Among the Valari, this act was called the crawl. It was not humiliation. It was something else. It meant trust. It meant surrender without fear. It meant opening one's fate to another. Gasps rippled across the chamber. The aides behind Elias almost stepped forward, but he raised a hand to stop them. His pulse quickened. Calith lifted her head and looked at him directly. Her eyes shone like twin stars. And then, despite the weight of centuries of tradition pressing against her, she smiled. It was a small smile, gentle and steady. But in that moment, Elias felt the entire galaxy shift. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with shock, disbelief, and a strange kind of hope. Elias stood frozen, staring back at her. He could not yet guess what her plan was or why she had chosen him, a single human, to receive this dangerous gesture. But one thing was clear. Nothing would be the same after this moment. The chamber had never been so silent. Even the living crystals on the walls seemed to dim, as though they, too, were holding their breath. Kaleth remained on the ground, her pale hands pressed flat against the crystal floor, her body lowered in a posture of peace. Her smile lingered, quiet but unwavering, as she looked at Elias. No one moved. The other Valari counselors remained frozen in their armored suits, their glowing visors flickering with emotion that Elias could not read. He only knew that whatever Kaleth had done, it was more than bold. It was dangerous. Finally, one counselor's voice burst through the silence, sharp and metallic. "Kaleth, rise at once. You insult your people and your ancestors. You expose us to weakness before this outsider." But Kaleth did not rise. Instead, she lowered her head further, touching her brow to the floor. The motion sent a shiver through the chamber. For the Valari, this was the deepest sign of trust, a surrender of both vision and protection. She was blind to any attack, defenseless against anyone who wished her harm. Elias's aides shifted behind him. One whispered, "Commander, what is happening?" Elias raised a hand again, silencing them. His heart beat fast. He understood the meaning of Kaleth's gesture. His cultural training had made it clear. For a Valari, to crawl was not weakness. It was an offering, a message. "I trust you with my life." The question burned in his mind. Why him? Why humanity? Another counselor stood, the black exosuit towering high. The voice that came out was filled with anger. "She disgraces us all. To bear herself before a human, an unproven species, this is treachery." Kaleth finally spoke, her voice soft but carrying across the chamber. "No, this is truth. You speak of honor, of tradition, but what is honor if it cannot survive change? What is tradition if it cannot bend to trust?" The council erupted in metallic voices, each one overlapping the other. The chamber shook with their fury. Elias remained still, his eyes fixed on Kaleth. She was not looking at her own people. She was looking at him. Her smile was small, but there was something defiant in it, as though she dared him to reject her. Elias felt the weight of her gaze. He realized he stood at the center of something far greater than himself. If he rejected her gesture, he would confirm the fears of the Valari, that humans were unworthy, untrustworthy, dangerous. But if he accepted it, he would be binding himself and humanity to Kaleth's risk. Elias breathed slowly, forcing his mind to clear. He could feel sweat at the back of his neck. He thought back to Earth, to the long nights of war reports, to the images of burned outposts on the borders, both human and Valari, to the faces of soldiers who had lost hope in the possibility of peace. And now here was Kaleth defying her entire culture, offering trust not to her own people but to him. "Commander," one of his aides whispered sharply, "this could be a trap. If you move toward her, you may provoke them." Elias did not answer. He stepped forward once, his boots echoing on the crystal floor. The council chamber erupted with voices again, shouts of outrage bouncing off the walls. But Elias ignored them. His eyes stayed on Kaleth. She had not moved. She remained bowed low, her hands trembling slightly against the floor, though her smile still lingered. Elias came to a stop a few paces away. He crouched slowly, lowering himself until his eyes were nearly level with hers. He spoke softly, so that only she and those closest could hear. "Ambassador Kaleth, why me?" Her eyes shimmered, bright blue and green swirling like ocean currents. Her voice came as a whisper, fragile yet strong. "Because your people still believe in things we have forgotten. You believe in beginnings. We only remember endings. I choose you because you still hope." Her words struck him harder than any speech. He searched her face, looking for any sign of falsehood, but found none. Behind him, he could hear the fury of the council growing louder. Metal fists slammed against the floor. Voices barked accusations, warnings, threats. Elias knew that every second stretched the tension tighter. If he touched her hand, it would be seen as acceptance. If he turned away, the fragile bridge she was building would collapse forever. He thought of the men and women back home who had sent him here with only one hope, that war might be avoided. He thought of the Valari soldiers he had seen in battle, fighting with the same desperation as humans. Both sides had lost too much already. Elias reached out. Slowly, carefully, he placed his hand over hers. The chamber fell silent. Kalith lifted her head, her smile deepening just slightly. For a moment the two of them remained like that, human and Valari, hand against hand, no armor, no shield. The image would burn itself into memory forever. A metallic voice finally broke the silence, trembling with fury. This is betrayal. You choose the human over your own people? Kalith turned her head toward the council, her voice calm but firm. No, I choose truth. I choose to trust what you fear. The anger in the chamber surged again, but Elias saw something else too, hesitation. Not every counselor shouted. Some remained still, their glowing visors fixed on the two of them, watching, thinking. Kalith rose slowly from the floor, though she did not break contact with Elias's hand until she was standing. When she finally let go, she looked at him once more. Do not fail me, human. Elias straightened. He met her gaze with steady eyes. Nor you me. The council chamber remained a storm of fury and disbelief, but under the noise, Elias felt the beginning of something fragile. Something new. It was not peace yet. It was not safety. But it was a step, a gesture of trust. The council chamber was no longer silent. It had become a storm. Voices clashed like thunder inside the great hall. The armored Valari shouted at one another, their metallic voices full of fury and disbelief. The sound of fists slamming against the floor rang again and again, shaking the crystal beneath their feet. And yet, in the middle of that storm, Kalith and Elias stood quietly, facing each other. Elias kept his hands at his sides now, but he could still feel the warmth of her hand in his memory. That single touch had shifted the balance of the entire room. He could feel the weight of 1,000 years of tradition pressing down, demanding that he retreat, demanding that he let her stand alone. But Kalith's eyes held him still. The council leader, a massive figure whose armor glowed with deep crimson symbols, finally raised a hand. The noise fell quiet, though it did not vanish. Rage still burned in the air. Ambassador Kalith, the leader's voice boomed. You dare break the shield oath before an outsider? You dare expose yourself in weakness to a species untested? Explain yourself or face judgment here and now. Kalith turned from Elias to the leader. Her silver skin shimmered faintly under the crystal light. She bowed her head slightly, not in submission but in respect. I will explain, she said. Her voice was soft, but it carried across the entire chamber, cutting through the anger. The leader folded his armored arms. Then speak and speak well. For your actions shame us all. Kalith drew in a breath. When she spoke again, her words were slow, measured, but filled with quiet fire. Our people are not united. We sit here pretending strength, but we are divided. Some of you call for war against humanity. You see their growth, their courage, and you fear them. Others wish to ignore them, to hide in tradition and armor, hoping they will vanish into the void. But she placed her hand against her chest. I see something different. I see hope, murmurs broke out again. The leader slammed a fist to silence them. Hope, he spat. In them? In humans? A species that barely learned to cross the stars? Kalith turned her gaze back to Elias, then to the council again. Her eyes glowed brighter now, filled with emotion. Yes, because they have what we have lost. Look at them. They are fragile, soft, unarmored, yet they dare to step into the galaxy with open hands. They are not bound by fear of showing themselves. They are not trapped by the chains of their past. They still believe in beginnings, in trust, in trying, even when failure waits. She paused, and her voice softened. We Valari have forgotten this. We hide behind our armor, behind endless wars, behind rules that no longer serve us. We believe only in endings. But the humans, she looked at Elias again, they believe in something greater. They remind us of who we once were. Elias felt the words strike deep. He saw the anger in the council, but also the uncertainty. Some of the armored figures shifted uncomfortably, as though her words cut too close to truth. The crimson-armored leader let out a harsh, metallic laugh. You romanticize weakness. You worship prey. What you call hope is nothing but recklessness. And you would place our future in the hands of this human. Kalith raised her chin. Yes, I would. The chamber exploded with sound again. Shouts of traitor and madness echoed. But under the chaos, Elias noticed something important. Not every counselor shouted. Some remained silent. Some even leaned forward, their glowing visors fixed not on Caliph in anger but in thought. Elias understood what was happening. Caliph had cracked something open, a secret truth, and now the eyes of the council were turning toward him. The leader noticed it too. He pointed one massive armored finger at Elias. "And what of you, human? Do you claim what she says is true? Do you claim your people are worthy of such trust?" Elias's heart pounded. He felt every gaze pressing into him, waiting. His aides behind him shifted nervously, whispering warnings, but he did not listen. This was the moment. He took a slow step forward, his boots echoing. "Ambassador Caliph speaks truth," he said clearly. His voice carried, though it was quieter than the booming armor. "We are fragile, yes. We bleed easily. We make mistakes. But we keep standing back up. We believe in building something better, even when the odds are against us. That is not weakness. That is strength." He paused, scanning the armored faces. "And if that strength threatens you, then perhaps you fear the wrong thing. You fear us because you see in us what you have lost. But you don't need to fear. You can remember." The silence that followed was heavy, filled with tension. The Crimson leader's voice shook with rage. Arrogant words. "Do you think we will bow to your speeches, human?" But another counselor spoke up, their voice calmer, curious. "And yet, his words ring true. Do we not fear change more than we fear them?" The leader turned sharply. "Silence. You would side with this traitor?" But it was too late. The chamber had shifted again. Division was no longer whispered. It was visible. Caliph stepped closer to Elias, her voice rising with passion. "You see? Even now the truth spreads. We cannot silence it forever. Humanity is not perfect, but they are alive in ways we have forgotten. That is why I crossed this chamber. That is why I laid myself down before him, because I believe trust is stronger than fear." She looked back at Elias and her smile returned. Small, but powerful. Elias met her gaze, feeling the weight of her choice. He realized then that the risk she had taken was not just for herself. It was for him, for his people, for a fragile future that might not survive without this moment. The Crimson leader roared again, his armored frame rising to its full height. "Enough, this experiment ends now." Guards removed the traitor and the human both. Armored figures at the edges of the chamber shifted, weapons glowing faintly. Elias's aides gasped, stepping back. But before anyone could move, Caliph raised her voice one last time. "You can remove us," she said firmly. "You can silence me. You can even strike this human down. But you cannot erase what has been seen today. You cannot erase the truth that lives in your own hearts." For a moment, even the guards hesitated. Elias felt his pulse quicken. He knew the danger was real, but he also saw what Caliph meant. The seed had been planted. The council was no longer united, and from that seed something new could grow. The order to remove them still hung in the air. Valari guards stood at the edges of the chamber, their weapons glowing faintly as they prepared to advance. The crimson-armored leader towered above the rest, his voice booming with fury. "Take them away. Let their weakness be erased before it spreads further." But no one moved. The guards hesitated. The counselors hesitated. Even the walls seemed to hesitate, as the living crystals dimmed and pulsed like a heartbeat. Elias stood very still. He felt Caliph's presence beside him, calm but tense, her silver skin gleaming faintly in the light. He could see the fire in her eyes, but also the risk. She had already given everything. If he failed now, her courage would mean nothing. Slowly, Elias took a breath. He reached up to the collar of his uniform. Behind him, his aides gasped. "Commander, no," one whispered sharply. "Don't," but Elias ignored them. With steady hands, he unsealed the protective layer of his gear. Piece by piece, he removed the coverings that shielded him from the alien environment. First the collar, then the chest plate, then the gloves. Each sound echoed through the chamber. The counselors stared, their glowing visors fixed on him. When the last piece of protection fell to the ground, Elias stood bare in only his simple underlayers, unarmored and unshielded. He was completely exposed before the Valari. A wave of murmurs rushed through the chamber. To the Valari, this act was almost unthinkable. A human had mirrored Caliph's gesture. The Crimson leader snarled. "What game is this?" Elias raised his voice, calm but strong. "This is no game. This is humanity." He stepped forward into the center of the chamber, unarmed, unshielded, fragile before the towering armored figures. "You call us weak because we lack your armor," Elias said. "Because we bleed easily, because we show our faces without fear. But you mistake openness for weakness. You mistake trust for recklessness. What you see as fragile is the very reason we survive." His voice grew stronger with each word, his heart pounding but his will steady. "Humans have always lived exposed to the universe. We have no shells, no natural weapons. Yet we stand, we endure. We fall and we rise again. We build not by hiding from one another, but by standing together, by sharing our strength. We do not survive because we are hard. We survive because we are open." He turned slowly, letting his words fall into the silence. The counselors shifted uneasily, their massive suits groaning as they moved. Some clenched their fists in anger, but others lowered their heads slightly as if considering. "Look at us," Elias continued. "We are a young people. We make mistakes. We fail often. But we always try again. That is our fire. That is our strength. And it is a strength we offer, not just to ourselves, but to all who will stand with us." He spread his arms wide, showing his bare form. "This is who we are. We do not hide." The chamber was silent. Kalith's eyes glowed brighter as she watched him. She had risked everything on this moment, and Elias knew it. He could feel her hope pressing against him like a weight, urging him not to falter. Then it happened, a flash of light, a sharp hum. One of the guards raised his weapon and fired. The energy bolt shot across the chamber, aimed straight for Kalith. Elias moved without thinking. He lunged forward, throwing himself between Kalith and the blast. The energy struck his side with a searing burn. He staggered, pain exploding through him, but he stayed on his feet. Gasps filled the chamber. Even the armored counselors jerked in surprise. Elias gritted his teeth, his voice strained but strong. "This is what humanity does. We protect, we trust, even at the cost of pain." Kalith caught his arm, steadying him. Her eyes burned with fierce emotion. She turned to the council, her voice rising like a blade of light. "You see? He shields me when you would strike me down. He gives himself when you would only take. Tell me, who here is truly weak?" The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy, trembling with the weight of her question. The Crimson leader slammed his fist down. "Lies, deception. This human plays at honor to manipulate us." But another counselor spoke, their voice quieter, thoughtful. Yet he did not hesitate. "He bled for one of us. Tell me, leader, how many of us would bleed for a stranger?" The chamber stirred. The division grew sharper. Elias forced himself to stand straighter, though his side burned with pain. He placed a hand over his wound, his voice steady despite the weakness creeping into his limbs. "You can call us weak," he said, "but you cannot deny what you have seen. Humanity offers trust freely. We show ourselves as we are. And when someone places their trust in us, we do not let it be wasted. We fight for them. We protect them. We bleed for them." His eyes swept the chamber, meeting visor after visor. "If you fear that, then perhaps you fear not us, but the truth inside yourselves." The words echoed, filling the silence. Kalith stood taller beside him, her silver skin glowing in the crystal light. She placed her hand gently on his shoulder, steadying him. "Today you have seen two choices," she said to the council. "One path is fear. It will lead to endless war, endless endings. The other is trust. It will lead to something new. The choice is yours." The council chamber remained divided. Some shouted for her removal, others demanded war, but more than a few remained silent. Silent because they were thinking. Silent because doubt had entered their hearts. Elias could see it. Kalith could see it too. The seed had grown. The Crimson leader roared again, but his voice no longer carried the full weight of the chamber. He still towered, still commanded fear, but something had changed. Something irreversible. Elias, still bleeding, stood unarmored before them, and Kalith stood beside him, smiling faintly despite the danger. Together, they had set fire to tradition, and though the flames burned slow, they were spreading. The chamber was quiet, though the tension still vibrated in the air like electricity. Guards lowered their weapons, uncertain, their visors flickering with confusion. The council was divided, some shouting, some silent, some simply staring in disbelief. Elias and Kalith stood together in the center of the room. Elias's uniform had been torn in the struggle, and a faint burn mark ran along his side where he had intercepted the energy blast. But he was upright, steady, alive. Kaleth's silver skin shimmered faintly, her expression calm, her eyes glowing, her faint smile still present. For the first time in centuries, the Valari Council had no single voice. The once unified chamber was fractured, the rigid hierarchy challenged by vulnerability and truth. The crimson-armored leader stomped, trying to regain control. Enough, this human cannot be trusted. And this, Kaleth, you have endangered us all. Kaleth lifted her head, standing tall, though her posture was still graceful, still calm. I have risked everything for truth, for trust. If that endangers you, then perhaps it is your fear, not mine, that is your true danger. The words hung in the air. Some counselors murmured agreement, while others glared, trembling with anger, but a few who had remained silent now spoke. Perhaps, one voice said slowly. Perhaps the human is right. We hide behind our armor. We call it strength, but it is fear. Another counselor, smaller in stature but equally imposing, nodded. We have forgotten what it means to trust. To risk everything for something greater, perhaps. Today we are reminded, the Crimson Leader roared, fury in every metallic word. Do you all betray tradition for sentiment? For the words of a human? Kaleth stepped closer to Elias, her hand brushing gently against his shoulder. It is not betrayal. It is remembrance. It is hope. Look at him. He stood unarmed, unshielded, yet he did not falter. He showed us that courage is not in protection, it is in trust. The room grew quieter. The force of her words sank in. The tension remained, yes, but something new had entered. Possibility. Elias straightened, ignoring the ache in his side. He felt the eyes of both humans and Valari upon him. He could feel the weight of the future pressing on him. He knew that one wrong move, one wrong word, and all of this, everything, could collapse, but he did not hesitate. He spoke slowly, deliberately, making every word count. You have seen strength, Elias said, his voice steady despite the pain. Not the strength of armor, not the strength of weapons, but the strength of courage, of honesty, of trust. Humans are not perfect. We fail, we falter. We bleed, but we rise again. And when we rise, we lift others with us. That is our fire. That is what Kaleth has shown you. It is worth believing in. A few counselors leaned forward, their visors glowing brighter as if absorbing his words. Kaleth smiled faintly, and this time her smile seemed to reach across the room, softening hardened faces. Her expression spoke more than words could. She had chosen hope, and that choice was unshakable. The Crimson Leader banged his fist again. And what of war? What of betrayal? You would trust these humans with your lives? Elias took a deep breath. I do not ask you to trust us blindly. I ask you to see what has been shown. Trust begins with a step, not a leap. Kaleth took that step. I followed. And now you can choose to take one yourselves. The council erupted again, though this time the noise was different. It was no longer just rage, it was argument, debate. Voices calling out for compromise, for thought, for reason. The seeds of change were spreading. Kaleth turned to the council again, her voice rising above the din. If we continue to fight, both our peoples will suffer. But if we reach across the divide, if we trust even a little, we can build something stronger than either of us alone. That is why I crossed this room. That is why I laid myself bare before him. Because trust is the only path forward. She smiled once more, that quiet, gentle smile, and for a moment the chamber held its breath. Elias felt something warm in his chest. That smile, small, serene, unshakable, was no longer just for him. It was a symbol, a signal, a spark that could ignite change. Outside the council chamber, across the galaxy, stories began to spread. Humans and Valari alike would hear of the moment a Valari ambassador dared to expose herself before a human, and a human dared to stand with her. It became a story told in whispers, then in headlines, then in history. It became the smile that reminded both civilizations that trust was stronger than fear. Back in the chamber, some counselors finally lowered their fists. They were still cautious, still unsure, but they were listening. Some spoke quietly to one another. Voices no longer full of fury, but curiosity. The Crimson Leader remained, but even he faltered, sensing that he could no longer command the room alone. Change had begun, whether he liked it or not. Elias looked at Kaleth. You did it, he whispered. She smiled just a little and nodded. We did it. For a long moment, human and Valari stood side by side, their eyes meeting in mutual understanding. No words were needed. The act itself, the courage, the choice had said everything. It was fragile, yes. The alliance was not yet complete. There would be obstacles, skeptics, and those who wanted war. But the first step had been taken, and sometimes that step was enough to start a journey that changed the course of history. In the days that followed, meetings continued. The Valari began to see humans not as a threat, but as potential allies. Joint missions were planned, small collaborations first, then larger ones. Stories of the chamber spread across both civilizations, inspiring trust in places where there had only been fear. And through it all, Kaleth's smile became a symbol. A reminder that even in the darkest halls of tradition, one act of courage, one choice to trust could light the way forward. Elias returned to Earth months later, weary but proud. The galaxy was still dangerous, still filled with uncertainty, but he carried with him the knowledge that trust had power. Vulnerability could build bridges stronger than walls. Courage was not just in battle, it was in opening oneself to others. He remembered Kaleth's eyes, glowing softly in the chamber. He remembered her smile, quiet and unwavering, and he knew that no matter what came next, humanity had shown the Valari something they had long forgotten. That sometimes, the greatest strength is to show your true self, and to invite another to do the same. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time in centuries it could hope.